Sometime around last week, Eminem released these parts of his interview with Sway, legendary interviewer, legendary media personality. Sway, love the dude, like the interview. A little. It could have went a little bit further, in my opinion, but Sway's always been a respectful media personality. Never had an issue with him. So seeing this was like cool. Like if there was anyone that I would prefer interview Eminem, even though I don't know if it's from the most unbiased point of view, I can say from the most respectful point of view. I, much like everyone else, was not expecting this interview to come out. I randomly happened to click on something and saw that Sway and Eminem were having an interview, and I was like, it's lit, but I saw part one. So much like everyone else, I was cock teased when they ended part one with, well, what's your relationship with Joe Budden? How do you feel towards what he's been saying about you? And then they cut it off. So I was like, damn, this sucks. But they released the rest of the interview day by day, and we got up to part 4 in the interview series, and part 4, I believe, came out yesterday. And I'm commenting on this today because I decided to watch the entire interview again in its entirety, part 1 to 4 with no breaks in between, no waiting. So I wanted to just take the whole thing in and process it all. People over the weekend have been asking me how I felt about Eminem's response to all of the criticism that he's been receiving outside of the album. Now, I'm not going to rehash some of the details that I did when it comes to the controversy that Eminem sparked over his track Fall, where he comes at media personalities, coming at Tyler the Creator, coming at Joe Budden. I'm not going to rehash that. I've already done that in my podcast in the first episode of it. But if I'm going to take away anything from this interview, it has to be how sensitive Eminem is. And I'm not really saying that as an insult. I'm just saying it as a surprise. I didn't realize or understand really how much Eminem lives by his profession. And when he spoke in part 4 of his Sway interview, speaking on how he felt hip hop empowered him and felt that hip hop was as like a father to him, it helped identify him. It made him feel like a man, or made him feel tough even when he wasn't, even when he didn't have any of the characteristics of someone that you would classify as tough. It made him feel like he was this king amongst men, like he could do anything. And I completely understand his sentiment that, abiding by a piece of art, much like a religion to a degree, and adapting to it, and forming your lifestyle around it. I mean, Eminem, for the most part, lives, eats, breathes, and sleeps hip hop, or lives, eats, breathes, sleeps rap. And when he was going on and talking about how rap was like a father figure to him in a way, it made the entire thing mean that much more. Because I know there are a lot of artists and a lot of creators out there that, really love hip hop. So if you look at it from the perspective of Eminem, if hip hop has been like a father to him, if hip hop has been like this religion to him, to see the spirit of, or see hip hop itself come back and tell you you're not good enough, is essentially having your father tell you you're not good enough. It's essentially having the thing that you love the most betray you in a way. Now, while Eminem did do things artistically to make it so people that were in the realm of hip hop didn't necessarily take to his albums and to his music decisions the best way, I can say there are a lot of people, again, and I've said this before, that took their criticism of Eminem they took it to a much harsher degree. Number one, we expect more from Eminem just by default because he's given us so much material throughout his lifespan, and he's raised a bar that he himself cannot reach again. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I doubt it, and it's okay. Nobody is ever as good in their later years as they were in their prime, and that's fine. Like, I'm not expecting you to be Superman at 50. And I can tell a lot of people were basing their critique of Eminem off of their expectation of him to still be that superhero at a later age, not obviously understand or catching on to the fact that he's going to have less motivation, he's going to be a little less hungry, he's going to have a little less drive, and he's spoken about so many things, just in my opinion, that it's like, where else can this artist go? He's been almost everywhere. Hypothetically, literally, he's been everywhere he can go artistically, damn near. And it's like, what else can he really talk about? And I'm sure that's been a struggle for Eminem, trying to be better than his past self every time he comes out with a new album. So the motivation for this album was 100% there when he found his foot. He found his second wing and decided to go at criticism. You know, what else? Who else would make an album literally just responding to criticism? Russ tried to in a way, but he was way too self-involved to pull it off successfully, in my opinion, and just not talented enough as an MC for me to be invested into 14 plus tracks of him going on and on about how people hate on him. So the Eminem we kind of got off Kamikaze was a guy who seemed hurt, a guy that seemed betrayed, a guy who was annoyed, a guy who had felt as if his legacy was being thrown under the rug because people didn't like his album. Now, I don't think that translated perfectly in the interview because at some moments Eminem's blaming the fan base for not having a trained enough ear to appreciate the difference in quality of his music from the current climate of the hip hop landscape today, and saying that since we don't listen to his type of music on average, or since the type of music he makes is so much different from the climate that we're in right now, we just don't understand it, which is a bit of a pretentious take. It's a little bit of a pat on the head to the kiddies around listening to your music, saying they don't like it. Oh, there's just something wrong with your ears, little boy, little girls. You don't really understand what I'm doing, but I understand. I get that you don't like it. It's not for you. I hate when people say shit's not for you. Like, maybe I just don't like it because I don't find it enjoyable. Maybe it was meant for everyone, and the artist doesn't want to acknowledge that it might just not have been well received. And while yes, there are plenty of children today and plenty of people in general that don't prefer Eminem's style of making music and would prefer some 808s and some trap beats and some triplet flows and some some ad libs, whatever it is that everybody's into right now in hip hop. While there are some people that will definitely prefer that, Eminem is prey to that same thing as well. I mean, I'm sure Eminem is not listening to music from the 1920s because he appreciates the sound of it. And Eminem walks right back into his same trap by saying, oh, well, I was up for a Grammy and I lost out to this person whose music he likely doesn't listen to, and he mentioned someone he's never heard of. And while I completely agree with his points about the Grammys, the argument is the same that he's using against the fan base that may not have enjoyed his most recent record, in saying that because his ears weren't used to whatever it is that this female artist who beat him out for album of the year was, that means that her album all of a sudden isn't good, or it couldn't be found enjoyable. Even worse in Eminem's case, though, he had never heard of the artist that he's complaining about. These guys have actually listened to your album and formed an opinion. You're saying this is the only reason why they found an issue with it is because it sounds different. I guess the only thing here that annoys me about the way Eminem describes his album Revival even is it's the way he's putting it across in the album as if he took an L for it. But in the interview and throughout most of the album, he's not really acknowledging that it wasn't the best album. Like, it's like he's still thinking that this was a great creation, and people are the ones that didn't get it. And the fan base is the ones that didn't, receive it well. They didn't listen right. But he's acknowledging that he took an L off of it. Even though personally I don't think it was an L, I just think it was a bad album. You don't have to call it an L. But Eminem says that, and then tries to make it seem like it's the listener's fault for not liking it. So which one is it? Now, while I do want to acknowledge that Eminem is in a position of privilege, I don't want to take away his right to frustration. But I do feel like his frustration is unfortunately mixed up in his album. Some of the ways that I can understand or empathize with this frustration is him being annoyed with how people have tried to tarnish his legacy based off of him releasing an album that they didn't prefer, or a couple of albums that they may not have preferred, right? And as if he's contributed nothing musically and always been this corny MC that has had nothing to say in terms of context, that's had nothing to say as far as making enjoyable music. People are taking away his right to frustration by saying, oh, he's a big rapper, and since you've sold a lot of albums in the past, you're not allowed to be upset with criticism of your album this time. I just feel his criticism is a little mixed up. There's rarely a line that separates Eminem complaining about his frustrations toward how people have received his album and how they've tried to tarnish his legacy based off their negative opinion of the album, versus the negative opinion of the album. It seems as if Eminem is trying to blur these lines when both of them separately are equally as important. At the end of the day, Eminem, you can't be complaining and be upset with people just not liking your album. You can't be upset or complain about people looking at a track list and then saying, oh, well, this might not be the best thing in the world for me. Because at the end of the day, Kendrick can come out tomorrow with an album full of pop features, and I might not be very inclined to look at these songs and be excited about them. Yeah, Eminem's right. I might actually be like, I don't know how these songs are going to work out. But if I listen to them and I see that these songs are actually good and I actually listen to them, even if I don't expect them to be anything great, I can still enjoy them. When I looked at the new Nerd record last year and I saw Rihanna featured on Lemon, I wasn't expecting anything. I'm not a big fan of Rihanna. I'm not. But when I heard her on the song, I was like, this is great. This is a great song. The more and more I see things in the public and in the media, the more and more I get annoyed with really big artists making these blanket statements as if every listener has the exact same thing to say about their music across the board, and it's just not true. And a reason I think this partially comes off in a negative way is because Eminem may be under the impression that the people who are critiquing his music are somehow under the impression that they could do better if given the same position. And I don't think we're arguing that. You know, there's a lot of people that listen to Eminem's records that don't want to be rappers themselves. They just enjoy the craft. They just enjoy, the sport of it. They just enjoy hearing people lyrically create. They just enjoy where an artist can go, how an artist can create their music, and they enjoy being a consumer. But as a consumer, you have the right to your opinion of whatever it is that you're consuming. So I feel like Eminem's arguing people's opinions rather than arguing factually incorrect statements. Because saying that Eminem's album was trash isn't a fact, but Eminem saying that it isn't trash isn't a fact. So are we going to go back and forth over our opinions this entire album until you say something that you can feel comfortable with, or someone that you're critiquing says something that you can feel comfortable with? Because that's all you're going to end up doing. To end the video, I don't think people understand why Eminem is actually angry. I don't think it's limited just down to, oh, I don't like the fact that people didn't like my album. If we listen to the interview and we hear Eminem say, rap has been like a father figure to me, it's helped me shape who I am, to hear the entire or majority of the spirit of hip-hop come back at him and say, well, this wasn't good enough, he feels the thing that's given him so much power, the thing that he holds closest to him, like damn near a religion, is somehow being torn away from him now. But what Eminem has to understand is hip-hop isn't like a religion, and it changes. There are new verses, if we're handling this like a Bible, there are new verses written in it every day. There are new chapters that are being added to it. And Eminem still has the oldest copy. And if he needs to not be offended anymore, and if he wants to continue in the landscape of the updated version of this Bible, of this religion that he's held himself to, he might just need to cut out the pages of the one that he learned and stay true to those. But you can't not believe in the new religion and be upset when they don't believe in your old religion. That's all I got to say. It's Shawn C. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all in the next one. Nice interview, gained some insight, and I'm out. Peace.